Welcome. My name is William Joel, and I'd like to welcome you to another edition of In Good Company. This episode's guest is Dr. Patrick Pennefather, assistant professor in design and production at the University of British Columbia, Vancouver, Canada. He's also faculty in residence at their Emerging Media Lab, which he just informed me won an award, and I'll leave it up to Patrick to talk about that. He is also co-appointed with the Master of Digital Media program, where for the past 10 years, he has developed a successful improvisation course for digital media collaborators, as well as mentoring teams, co-constructing scalable digital prototypes. His research and scholarly activities are centered within the investigation of mixed reality environments, including spatial audio research creations, hybrid performances in theater and dance, and collaborative user experiences across devices and disciplinary boundaries. And I will say this, that myself, I love interdisciplinary work, so it's going to be a pleasure to talk with Patrick. Patrick, welcome to In Good Company.
Thank you so much, Bill. Glad to be here.
Oh, yeah. Now, please, what is this award that Lab just won?
This is an IT award called the Cuccio Award, C-U-C-C-I-O, and it's a national award in Canada, and it recognizes advances and innovations in regards to IT in post-secondary education. So this award was in their collaboration bracket, and that category had me working with the Emerging Media Lab for them to support this course on project-based learning with emerging technologies that is called Developing Emerging Technologies. We'll launch our third pilot in January of next year.
Wow. It's lovely to have funding, isn't it? I'm hearing this in the background going, yeah, wonderful. But I'm also hearing that there's funding there, and awards also help in securing the funding because the schools go, oh, you got an award.
Let's hope that's the case. I think we're doing really good work with the Emerging Media Lab, and for sure we need more funding, always, all the time, especially to support developing technologies, as we both know, can be quite expensive with workstations and VR equipment, the latest headsets. It's a crazy world.
My own area happens to be a lot before I'm retired now. But before I retired, one of the big things was to develop a fairly functional 3D printing lab in cooperation with our mathematics department. We shared expenses, and it's a really good lab. I mean, with a good half a dozen solid 3D printers, tons of space for collaboration.
Wow.
So I'm hoping that, now that I'm retired, though, I'm hoping that lab is going to still be used well. Anyway, enough about me. Getting back to you. So pick any project that you're working on currently, have worked on, and tell me about it.
I'm excited to tell you about the Shakespeare XR initiative because it's a bunch of projects surrounding or revolving around this Shakespeare First Folio that I supported UBC libraries in acquiring last year. Mm-hmm. What we're working on now are ChatGPT motion captured actors who are going through a pipeline of eventually being triggered by a super old 400-year-old book called the Shakespeare First Folio that will allow characters to pop up on people's devices. And those characters will be reciting script based on Shakespeare's corpus, but guided and refined by a writer and ChatGPT-4. The point of that is to reinvent these Shakespearean characters for modern times and ask them, is there anything you would like to say that maybe you didn't have the opportunity to say in Shakespeare's plays? So we're playing with this idea of extending these worlds of Shakespeare that are rich and colorful and full of language and rich description and story. And we're bringing that to augmented reality in order to merge that technology with this super old technology of a folio that collected most of Shakespeare's works. So super excited about that process.
Excellent. What are the kind of disciplines you're attracting students from for the?
Across UBC, so many different types of disciplines are interested in this type of project development, and the interest is growing, which excites me and makes me super happy. So definitely in the arts, we have a lot of students. We have students from theater, from film, who are interested in exploring these new technologies, even though they may not have a lot of knowledge about them. They are put together with students from computer science and also from psychology and cognitive systems. Some of my strongest students are coming from cognitive systems, which in itself is interdisciplinary in its nature, combining psychology, computer science, the cognitive science, and language as well, and philosophy. So there are really good students that are open to learning about disciplinary processes that are necessary to undertake emerging technology development.
Now, this project, this is already underway, correct?
Absolutely, yeah.
When did it start?
It started at, I would say, in April of this year. Okay. Yeah, we started playing with GPT-4 and with a writer. I worked with a director, Stephen Heatley from my department, as well as actors from the theater and film department. And we went to Sawmill Motion Capture Studios and recorded a bunch of different scenes with these actors reciting this new Shakespeare script. So, yeah.
So what are some of the, how can I say, what are some of the goals that you set for this project?
For this one, it's really important that the students that are involved really learn about Agile, particularly, and to understand how to manage a project over time, to iterate on what they are creating, to learn more about prototyping and all that's involved in that, to be able to show work in progress and be okay with that. All of these are essential tools that I persistently teach students and facilitate.
It sounds like you're asking the students who are more the artistic side to learn something about the technical side of a project like this, as well as the students who are on the technical side to learn more about the artistic goals, as well as everyone learning about the cognitive goals, the educational goals, etc. How did this project come about?
It's interesting. It was, I think that it came about from the Shakespeare folio itself. And I started to think about how can we reinvent Shakespeare on virtual stages. And so the augmented reality is just one of them. The other one is using a touch table to provide users access to the folio, because we had to solve this problem. This is over 400-year-old book.
Oh, I know. Yes,
and it can fall apart when people touch it. So we're trying to continuously solve the problem of access and increasing access to that through digital means. So that was the motivation behind both the AR project and the touch table project, as well as making all of these resources accessible online.
It's funny you're talking about touch table. Thinking about some exhibits I've seen at the British Library in London.
Oh, yeah.
Where the exhibits there, they often have a touch table. In fact, I forget, it was an illuminated manuscript, which obviously they're not letting you touch, but they had digitized all the pages, and you could just digitally flip through the entire book. Nice. And it was augmented, et cetera. But what you're working on sounds way, way beyond this concept. It is moving it. Now, these avatars that pop up,
right?
They're going to be synthetic characters, or are they going to be actual videotapes of live characters?
Great
You talked about
question.
mocap a moment ago.
Yeah. Well, because we're going to be using motion capture, we've decided to experiment with Unreal's metahumans. So we are experimenting with optimizing them for mobile using Unreal, of course, and using the workflow of getting them to be augmented reality characters as metahumans. The challenge, which we've also taken on as a team, is how are we representing the actors? How are we representing the characters? And it's been a really interesting process and shift in representation, as you know, and as many viewers will recognize, in terms of actors wanting to be represented more accurately or represented somehow as themselves when they're being virtualized. And so I think the MetaHumans offers us the technology to do that. Of course, you need a 3D artist as well to be able to refine and to work on that. But it's interesting that the characters we chose represent quite a diversity, and we're trying to represent that all the way through the workflow.
Which plays from the folio have you captured scenes for?
Well, Macbeth, Othello, Antony and Cleopatra, Merchant of Venice, and Shakespeare himself.
Okay.
So GPT-4 has helped us.
I'm just thinking, yeah, well, Shakespeare himself, that's a bit of a loaded question, because
I know
there are representations of him in the arts, but there's also doubt that they truly are him. You know, what did he really look like? You know, there's a lot of controversy about that. I know. Wow. Now,
and I look forward to adding.
I'm just thinking about, along with these digitization of the characters, are you looking to turn this in? I'm thinking multidisciplinary again, into a more rounded, fuller experience, as in developing appropriate period sets, lighting, music. I mean, are you going as the expression goes? Are you going to try to jump the full 9 yards?
We are going to do that, and so there is a pipeline in the works, and we're going for different types of funds now to create a VR experience as well as a mixed reality experience. So think about this project, though, as not wanting to go down the accurate period route. We actually want to reinvent Shakespeare for now. We want to place the characters in contemporary society and have them deal with contemporary issues. So can we do that with Shakespeare? Have people done that? Absolutely. There's a whole history of reinventing Shakespeare for the present time, whatever that time happens to be.
Not changing the words from the plays, but everything else, the time period, the costumes, the music, everything shifting. And I've seen many plays shifted, to other time frames. I mean, one that strikes my mind right away is Hamlet, that Kenneth Branagh did for film, where he moved it up, about 200 years, I think?
I think so, yeah.
I think he moved it into the 1800s. And I remember in London seeing a production of Romeo and Juliet transposed to 1950s Italy.
Yeah.
With all the mobsters you might expect. And it really does show how timeless his plays are.
Absolutely. And we are playing with controversial things here. Like, even me saying GPT meets Shakespeare is going to rile some people up, because they're going to say, what are you doing? Why are you, wait a minute, how dare you?
I mean, considering what I've been reading about artificial intelligence, specifically in the arts community, where it really is developing very separate camps which is there's some camps that say, no, it's just another medium. It's another tool that we can use. And others are saying, no, it's going to replace us. People are going to, instead of, hiring somebody to do graphics design, they're just going to hire some generative program.
Right.
So I think it's in its shakeout cruise period.
I think you're right. I think, and the creative opportunities for generative AI are pretty big when you think of it as a prototyping tool, which is how I integrate it as well during some of the workflows in these emerging tech pipelines. And the thing that I like about generative AI right now is that I also think it's shaking up patterns of artistic creation. It's forcing us to look at those patterns and evaluate them and go, is that really that homogeneous, that mediocre, what I create, that an AI can replicate it? Wait a minute. What am I creating? What am I putting out in the world? Is this an opportunity for me to shift that and disrupt patterns? So that's the other thing that I see that's happening with generative AI, and that I'm trying to establish as a value for my students, not to use it as a final product, but as a prototype.
Well, my argument comes back with that, and I'll just mention this, and probably this will get edited out anyway.
It's okay. I love it.
It's that generative AI right now produces new products by statistically analyzing and utilizing existing end products. But what they haven't done yet is use as the learning set for any of these AI systems information about the artistic process, not just the final outcome.
Yeah, nice.
And I say that because that's actually a project I have on the back burner right now.
That's fantastic. I love
that to go out and actually develop a method of capturing the artistic process, and using that as the learning set for an appropriate AI system, generative system. Yeah, I know.
That's great, though.
It's just in the very early stage, talk stage right now, because then the question is, if you have a final product, you have the final product. But if you're talking about the artistic process, you say, well, what do we measure in the artistic process? How do we capture the artistic process? Because even if I'm capturing every single thing that an artist does physically, those physical actions are actually still end products of an internal process inside their minds, which we can't see. We're always seeing end products, interim products, as well as final end products. We don't see the actual process. We see artifacts of the process. So anyway, that's a whole different story. So tell me about another project you've been working on with the students at UBC.
Yeah, so one of them in the Developing Emerging Technologies class had to do with creating a motions library. And so in that class, students also need to work and understand Agile. And that's one of the things, because you mentioned talking about processes and creative processes. And that is one thing that when I teach, I try to consistently bring students' attention to. How do you work together? How do you accomplish tasks together? How do you learn what you need to learn in order to complete these tasks, to complete a project like the Motions Library? So that example fits really well into what I teach, because a lot of students are not familiar with Agile processes at all. And in fact, they don't even know why I'm teaching it until I start to teach it. And then they start to understand.
From the artistic side are going to say, why are you teaching us? That's like an engineering approach.
Totally. Prototype? What? Why are you using that?
Prototype. I just paint. I just sculpt. I'm like,
Exactly.
oh. You should throw them, show them some videos. I just saw a recent video um, relating to the Alvin Ailey Dance Studio,
Nice.
New York City,
Yeah.
and they have an ongoing project. This is every year where they bring in two emerging choreographers in the fall, two more in the spring, and they work with the students to develop choreography, but in a very organic manner.
Mm.
So what they develop along the way are prototypes.
They
They're
do.
not
Absolutely.
the full choreography, the full dance at the end. They're experimenting, and that's the whole idea about a prototype, is to bring it to a certain level where it has certain of the features fully implemented, but there are other features, like in a dance, which have not been implemented. They haven't been
Absolutely.
worked out, and you're using it to test out ideas. You know, I'm just
Absolutely.
passing it along with something else. I mean,
It relates
the thing
though.
is that
It
artists
relates.
do a lot of prototyping,
They do.
and I don't think students recognize that as much.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's so interesting you mentioned dance because I did a whole session with Ballet BC here in Vancouver, Canada, and another dance company, and it was experimental workshop. In order to get them used to different agile processes, we started with sketching, rapid sketching of an idea. And I have a fantastic whiteboard sketch that a team of four ballet dancers developed because part of the process as well was to empower those dancers to become choreographers as well. And so that was an interesting process. They drew two ballerinas boxing it out in a boxing ring. Now, you think that was just one of many ideas that were put out. What was beautiful about this idea is that inevitably they started to prototype it, became very attached to the idea. The dance company loved it, and the producer decided to actually construct a boxing ring outside in a beautiful Deer Lake Park, it's called, and they set up the entire scene. And it's such a great story because it shows you how, if you reflect back on the process, how useful those brainstorming processes are for any discipline, and especially the arts. And artists, I think, would get great value out of going through these types of iterative processes that
Yeah.
many technology producers and developers are used to.
When I think of artists like visual artists, I think, God, sketchbooks. Sketchbooks are the prototypes
Absolutely.
where they're working at ideas. They're just trying out ideas. Now, a question. I'm thinking about this dance one. Did they do a storyboard perhaps?
They did a storyboard. Absolutely. Yeah.
Did,
So
did, did,
that's how
did
it
they do an
evolved.
animatic?
They didn't do an animatic. They didn't get that far. I only had them for 3 hours and then
Oh,
they went off
okay.
with the company. But we did as much as we could in terms of, ideation and brainstorming. So just the beginnings.
But I'm thinking like technology, bringing in,
Yeah.
have them do a storyboard, digitize the panels, create an animatic with appropriate
Nice.
software, maybe add some music on it, etc. And God. Anyway, Patrick, this has been a wonderful talking about all these. I'm hoping that others who watch this will get ideas of things they can do. Now, obviously, at the end of this, we're going to put your contact info at the end. So
Sure.
if you get people contacting you, you have no problem?
I have no problem with that. Yeah.
I mean, would you be interested in having other schools, faculty from other schools work with you so you could have some inter-institutional work?
Absolutely. We're trying to set that up now, especially with this integration with the Emerging Media Lab. We're trying to set up national and international collaborators. I'm already bringing in industry partners, which is great. And even though that's a bit unknown for the academic community in terms of project-based learning and having industry come in as mentors, it's beautiful. That's what I'm also trying to create groundwork for and precedents and just this persistent integration with our communities of practice outside of the university as well.
Patrick, this sounds absolutely fabulous, your work. I'm jealous. I wish a lot of my projects had gotten this far. Patrick, thank you very much for being a guest on In Good Company.
Thank you so much, Bill.